Yes, all of our back. I think we are starting. A warm welcome to all of you, all the attendees, and welcome to the panelists. And I'm going to give you this whole thing about battered migrants, and it's going to be 6 to 7:30, 1 hour and 30 minutes. First, I will set the context. Then we will have the speakers. Then we'll have question and answers. Then we will have summary thoughts. You will see the presentation following this. The question we ask now, do the battered migrants matter for the state? This is the question we asked today. Who is doing this? Jesuit Resource and Response Hub, JRH, we call. Migrants webinar. This is one of the series that JRH is doing. And this is going to be focused on only migrants. Later, different ones. We have with us, I will introduce the panelists later, but I'll mention these names. I am Father Joe Arun from Loyola College, Chennai, LIBA Director. Mr. Harsh Mander, panelist. Mr. Nikhil Day, panelist. Dr. Pernari Sami, a panelist. I will talk to you all about where they are coming from. You must have seen the entire scene of the plight of the migrant workers in the country. Very, very sad story. It's an absolutely painful story. Migrant workers who built cities, who built really, the word built really India, who have contributed to the nation building are now forgotten, neglected, battered, discarded. They are literally in the streets today. Almost 64% of migrant workers have less than 100 rupees left. And 78% have not been paid since lockdown. They want to go home, but their path is blocked by the government. Can you imagine? But remember, that a huge majority of migrant workers is from the marginalized sections, Dalits, tribals, who escaped the oppression and caste discrimination in their natives. Today, the shutdown slammed at the face of the marginalized. But you know, in every crisis, what surfaces in India is caste. 7 decades into what can only be described as paradoxical modernity, India keeps its baggage of caste and feudalism intact. You said lockdown, stay at home. Where is home for migrants? What did home the migrant workers have? This is not asked. In my opinion, the relief package is not to save the migrant workers, but to keep them hostage. The response of the government to the plight of migrant worker brings out all that is rotten in today's India. I've seen class inequalities, loss of societies, moral compass, paralysis of the government, the toxic media, paralysis of politicians, not only politics, politicians both ruling and the opposition. They are packed into buses, others were shoved into makeshift relief camps. Strict orders were issued not to allow anyone to travel anymore. But they did not stop. Thousands, possibly lakhs, still continue to walk back or cycle or hitchhike. But they were not TV headlines anymore. They did not matter. Just did not matter. But they matter for us. So attendees, panelists, all of us who are concerned about the marginalized, for us, it matters. That's why we are here. This is a story of moral cussedness, political apathy and spin doctoring, where the states are inventing ways to keep the workers hostage, where the central government was passing on the buck to the state governments. Is this a democratic version of the system of indentured labor? Why did Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat governments suspend labor laws now when the migrants workers are returning home states? If this is their plight now, what does their future hold? Don't forget, when we talk of the future of migrant workers, we actually talk of the future of India because they build India. So what motivates? We should ask these questions. What motivates the migrant workers to undertake such an onerous and dangerous journey, risking their lives instead of staying in their cities waiting for help from the government? Is this a reverse migration, just temporary tiding over this crisis, or is it going to be permanent? We should ask this question. But let us not forget, migration to cities once upon a time was an attempt of the poor and the marginalized to break the vicious circle of poverty and to a great extent to escape the caste oppression in the rural India, in their own native places. They thought they escaped. All these migrants are now returning to the object poverty in their villages, going to succumb to the caste oppression of the landed majority. What is their future of these vulnerable communities of India? What we should do? What is our approach? This is the question I'm going to ask the panelists. This is going to be, we are going to reflect upon this. We should take not a singular approach, multi-pronged response and action. Do we have immediate relief and support to the stranded migrant workers? Can we influence the policy making? Is there a legal framework to protect these migrant workers? Can we protect them by laws? Because they are suspending laws, amending laws. What will happen to them? Is there a possibility of advocacy to make the state governments to empower the migrant workers? That's why we have the panels. It's not the panelists going to answer, but we are going to collectively look at the whole issue. We have with us Mr. Harsh Mander. He became an IAS officer in 1980. Was posted in Madhya Pradesh first, but he quit. You know when he quit? 2002 Gujarat riots. We saw that he said no. And he's the special commissioner to the Supreme Court of India in the Right to Food campaign. He's also former member of National Advisory Council. In 2018, Mr. Mander was appointed by the National Human Rights Commission as a special monitor to inspect the Assam detention centers. And he's been in the front line on these issues. At present, he is the director of Delhi-based think tank, the Center for Equity Studies. Next, we have Mr. Nikhil, well-known RTI activist, one of the founder members of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, what we call MKSS, along with the famous and popular Aruna Roy, Shankar Singh, and has been involved in struggles of the poor and work for justice, including at the grassroots levels, and also payment of minimum wages. He received the KL Modi Award for social service in 2013, and is also co-convener and member of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information, NCPRI, of the Central Employment Guarantee Council. Next, we have Dr. Pernari Sami, former professor of history. I have seen him working on subaltern history all the time. And he's a senior fellow of the Loyola Institute of Social Sciences Training and Research, LISSTAR, columnist, media contributor to so many magazines and media on current affairs and international affairs, on human rights violations. And you must have read his article in the front line, The Way Forward on Migrant Workers, and also Tamil Nadu Migrant Survey 2015. And he's been working consistently last 30 years or so on migrant workers, unorganized labor. He also visits and as a guest faculty to IIT in Chennai. These are the panelists. What we will do, how do you go about today? I will give the panelists 10 minutes to share their thoughts. After which, I will allow questions from the attendees, and my backroom team will give us the questions, the participants. After that, sufficiently we have dealt with questions, we have taken the questions. I will ask the panelists to give us summary thoughts. Summary thoughts will focus on what action points we want to have. What do we want the state governments to do? What do we do together in order to empower, support, and assist the migrant workers to return to their normal, if not normal, the new normal? Now, I'll just stop. May I invite Mr. Mander to speak to us 10 minutes. Let's keep to the time because our attendees are the participants from all over the world. It's not only from India. Keep that in mind, that we must be able to converse with international audience, and a huge number of people have signed in. So therefore, 10 minutes, then I will take. I'm not going to ring the bell, but you will do this for me. I think. Thank you. Over to Mr. Hashman.
Thank you. We've gathered together in this discussion at a moment which is one of an enormous humanitarian crisis. I fear that we are hurtling as a nation into the gravest humanitarian crisis that our country has seen in our lifetimes. Even the partition happened before me, the Great Bengal famine happened before me. I feel we are hurtling to a crisis of that scale and proportion. The first thing that I want to underline is that this crisis was not created by the pandemic. This crisis was created by how the government has chosen to respond to this pandemic. This crisis is entirely the creation of public policy choices by the state. This crisis also holds up a mirror to the kind of society, a society that is not only hugely unequal, but has been culturally comfortable with this inequality for far too long. The suffering that I see on the streets every time we step out in order to extend some kind of solidarity, feeding efforts and so on, of the Karwane Mohabbat and other colleagues, I am stunned by what I see about the scale of distress, both of people who are left behind in the city and the distress of the people who have left, who are trying to leave the city under all costs. One question that is asked is, why are they leaving? I would like to ask you, any of us who are gathered together today, suppose a moment comes in your life when overnight your work is taken away from you, there's no work, there's no food, the state offers you no support or solidarity. Uh, Even when an economic package is announced days later, it literally amounts to not more than maybe 1.5 days salary. Uh, uh, and you are also worried and threatened by an illness which seems to have brought the entire world on its knees. Where would you want to be? It's obvious that the only place you'd want to be at a moment like this is the place you call home. And therefore, it's not at all, if there was even the slightest degree of public empathy, uh, it would, everyone would have understood that people would want to get home in these circumstances. We understood it when students who were stranded abroad wanted to come. Special planes were organized for them. Even the students in Rajasthan, in Kota, special flights were organized from abroad. Special buses were organized here. Pilgrims were stranded. Special buses were organized for them. Why is it that we found it so difficult to anticipate, firstly, this longing for people to return to the place they call home? Uh, you know, at the time that the pandemic, the lockdown was announced, the number of cases in India were close to around 100. If 1 week had been given to people to return to their homes, and then the lockdown had happened, this entire tragedy could have been averted. There's another way that the tragedy could have been averted, and that is that, like most of us in the middle class, when our Prime Minister told us that to keep yourselves safe and all of us safe, you have to stay at home. You have to keep social distance. You have to wash your hands regularly, etc. He was speaking to a people where he assumed that A, you have a home, B, you will be assured of an income even if you stay and work from home. See that you have a home which is large enough to allow you social distance. And fourth, that you have running water and the resources to be able to wash your hands regularly and keep a general sanitation. It did not, it's extraordinary that our Prime Minister and all of those who took these decisions on our behalf got a sudden amnesia that at least 2/3 of the people in India do not qualify for any of these. That 9 out of 10 workers in India are in the informal sector who have no job security and who would not get an income for a single day that they do not work. The Prime Minister in his first address merely says the civil society should look after the poor. And that was the one line that he addressed to the poor. The rest of it was to the middle class people. And then in his second address to the country, he went a little further and said the employers should pay wages through the period of the lockdown. Firstly, 9 out of 10 workers are in the informal sector, and data tells us that only 17% of these informal workers have an identifiable employer. So at best, even if employers paid the wages, it would be only for 17%. The rest are casual workers, daily wage workers, and a very large segment of the self-employed, street vendors, waste gatherers, rickshaw pullers, sex workers, and a whole range of others. Now, out of those 17% of people who have identifiable employers, a large mass of them their employers are micro, small, medium enterprise owners who do not have the capacity to make this payment of wages, who did not have, and who should not, why should they have made the payment? This crisis was not of their creation. And I think it was most elementary, firstly, that a week should have been given with all trains functioning helping people to reach where they wanted to before the lockdown happened. And second, that during the period of the lockdown, the first day, the first announcement of the government should have been that everybody will be paid the equivalent of minimum wages for the period that they spend at home. And the public distribution system will get universalized, and everybody would get rations. They would get their wages. You don't have anything to worry. If you still wish to return home, you have a week, go peacefully, and then you have a lockdown. Now, this is what a, a, a state with the most elementary elements of compassion and justice would have done. But I would go a little further than this, because even if the state had done this, the large majority of the poor do not live in conditions where social distancing is possible, and they do
Exactly.
not have running water. And so even if income was assured, this entire strategy of the lockdown in any case was not protecting the large mass of the poor. So what I find particularly morally deeply culpable, and I'll use the word culpable advisedly. I mean, I would call it an act of criminal official decision making, because effectively what were we saying about the people were actually not extending the lockdown, has never in its very nature has not extended any kind of social distancing protection to people who live in slum shanties, to people who share 150 people sharing one common toilet, people who have no toilet, people who have no running water. None of them were even in the design, even in principle, had no access to social distancing. So effectively, what were the poor working class people being told? The working class people were being told, we will do nothing to secure your income and wages and food security. You still have to live. I mean, we really expect you to live in a 10 by 10 shanty, 50 days, of the lockdown, as if you were in a jail. Also, you have open spaces. We really expect you to be in there, which you're not going to be able to be. So we are actually extending protection to the middle class uh, on the backs of the suffering of the poor mass of working people, without extending you any protection at all. Then we don't have a public health system. 80% of all doctors in India are in the private sector. 80% of ventilators are in private hospitals. 66% of beds are in for-profit private hospitals, which means that even after the illness comes, it is 20% of the doctors and 20% of the ventilators and 33% of the beds in the public sector, which is going to be responsible to take care of everybody, especially the poor. It is, I can keep going on, and I have limited time, but you have to recognize how public policy has in this moment of crisis thrown the poor entirely under the bus, with no care for their protection from the illness or from hunger or from the lack of any kind of income resource. And then the state not allowing them, once this whole the whole really epic pictures came up into our hearts and minds, of people traveling. It is the largest movement of human population since partition. Some people estimate that it is even larger than partition. Once that happened, even then, if the state had shown compassion, it would have made some arrangements, like it has made arrangements for everybody else. But even till today, the state is not making arrangements. Even today, we have a large enough railway network. It is the envy of the world. It's the largest railway network in the world. The state needed to say, for the next 10 days, we will run every train across the country only for migrants to reach their homes free of charge. And and we could have reached people even at this stage, but they chose not to. They've run a very small number of trains. They're charging them money after they have been completely pauperized, and there are also a series of other disincentives to people to travel. They're being made as if they are somehow criminals leaving the city. And they, and it became very clear when the Karnataka government had decided to run 5 trains, which was not a great deal, just which carried 5,000 workers. And the Builders Association goes to the chief minister, and the chief minister cancels those trains, saying that no, we need labor when we restart the economy. So we look at the working class, and I'll just end here. We're looking at them only as an economic resource, like there's some kind of lifeless machines which should be available to us. They build our city, as you said. They not only build our city, they clean our city, they run our city, they drive us to homes, they cook our food, they take care of our children, they serve us our food, they do a myriad other things, and they also run our small factories. They make our life possible. We want them to stay on pause mode, live on fresh air, and just wait till we are ready. Once we are ready to restart, you should be next day available, and you should start working. We don't care what happens to you in the meanwhile. I think that is this crisis has held up a mirror to an extremely uncaring society and country and government. I'm told similar things are happening in other parts of the world. In the United States, a large majority of people who are dying are either people of color in slum shanties, or old people in care homes. And I think that the the people who are at the margins of all our societies are going to bear these burdens. And I think that India is demonstrating a very ugly version of an extremely uncaring state and society.
Oh, thank you so much. You have taken us through the lanes of the plight of the migrant workers, because you have said that governments have not understood the nature and composition and the living conditions of these migrant workers when they started this lockdown. Lockdown, it did not really protect the migrant workers, but actually protected the middle class.
Yeah.
The social distancing, when they live in these handy towns, what is in a way they will be able to protect themselves. Actually, the social lockdown is protect the middle class. You have said 80% of doctors in the private sector, and how will they protect these people? And also, you said the public policy was meant to protect the public. Actually, did not protect the public. So you have exactly looked at the perspective that we have taken. What did the state governments and the central government do? They have not done. They have not understood at all. This is where we will take up questions later. Let me move to, because quickly we will move to Mr. Nikhil there too, because he's an activist. Let us see. You are also combining administrative policy, all this you are weaving through those lanes. But now let us listen to Mr. Nikhil, who will be coming from the activist to fire. Let's listen. Over to Nikhil, please.
So Harsh is very much an activist as well.
Okay.
Whatever his past of being in the administration may be, and I think much of what he said also refers to, I think, these categories between activism or policy makers or people in government or out. Particularly at a time of crisis like this, we need to blur those boundaries, and we need to see our combined duty to do what we can. I'd like to, because we have a paucity of time, I'd like to actually focus on 3 different aspects, just break it down into 3 aspects. I completely agree with all that Harsh says, is that we are facing the largest humanitarian crisis that we have faced in this country. And many people across the world are facing a humanitarian crisis. But we are facing a policy-made crisis.
Right.
So that is something that's extremely important to understand, and that
Yeah.
separates what's happening here. We have only made things worse for a particular segment of society. Now, what have we learned about that segment of society? It's 100 million people. You know, when they first started coming out, what are called migrant workers, they are actually the workforce of this country. As Harsh said, that they are 9 out of 10 people. So it's not like some small segment. When they came out, because they're all hidden away, they are hidden in slums, they're hidden in 10 to a room, they're hidden in living conditions that we don't understand. People, responsible policymakers, people who think that they think about the rest of their people amongst whom they live, said, where have all these people been? Where are they coming out of? And they were only seeing a fraction of that lot who suddenly started emerging to go home. And then they started asking questions of themselves that made it obvious that for the last 30 odd years of this great neoliberal globalization dream of advancement, of growth, of wealth has not actually been shared by this large number of people. And they have lived in terrible working conditions and living conditions both. This began to come to light. And instead of leading to a much greater empathy, so what did we see? We saw numbers that we just didn't know. Till today, try and ask policymakers, academicians, others, what is that number? We have never counted. We have never counted in these cities or anywhere else.
Absolutely.
When you go around saying that you have to give aid, you don't know how many people you have to give food to. You don't know how many people that they're there. They are unseen, uncounted, uncared for. And therefore, they have never depended on government. This is not that lot of people with whom Harsh and I and people like us work, who we say they are completely at the margins. These are people who depended on their own bodies and their own extraordinary, just determination to try and make a life for themselves and their families. They are the workforce of this country, and we knew nothing about them. We did not, and then as we began to realize that actually they had no laws working for them, they had no living conditions worth it, that a diktat from the government of India to say stay where you are could not work, and a diktat from the government of India to say please feed them and please give them their wages could not work, because the relationship between them and their employees was not such that it could be maintained, and the government actually did not really care. If this government wants to get something done, it finds a way to do it. That is something that we've seen. But it did not really care. It was just making empty statements, hollow statements, one after the other. And that the people themselves understood and they knew. So as they realized they had no food, they had no place to stay, they had people who were throwing them out of whatever kind of accommodation they had no choice but to start leaving. So what do we have here and now? Where do we stand now? We still stand with the first time that the government has made a statement is when the finance minister yesterday said that we will give 5 kilos of food grain to 8 crore people, 80 million people. Actually, people say that figure is definitely more than 80 million people. But let us assume that it's 80 million people. How many of them have gone home? How many remain behind? Once again, the government is completely in the dark. And so are our other policymakers in the dark. And so is everyone else in the dark. And that's why we are seeing people walking. We are seeing them being run over. We are seeing them hungry. We are seeing them crying. We are seeing them in the biggest, worst, distressing situation. And these are not small numbers of people. We are seeing them with children in their arms. And we are unable to, even if we today want to, if we wanted to, once again, you keep talking, actually right across this country, those of us who are working with governments, and government is the only one who can respond to this kind of crisis. No kind of humanitarian aid can deal with the kind of crisis that it is. And it is a responsibility of government to deal with this because they have been the cause for it. Today, when you look at that situation, actually you realize that they asked for people to come on these websites and register themselves to go home. I can tell you from the state where I work, Rajasthan, 20 lakh people registered themselves. About 10.5 lakhs to go, to come back and about 8.5 lakhs to go. Now, what has been done with that lot that registered themselves, that came and registered themselves with the faith that someone would help them go home? Not once has there been a response. Not in Rajasthan, not in any part of the country. And some trains, some measly number of trains are put forth, and in that also helter-skelter, some list comes and people go. So obviously people are going to look for trucks, are going to look for walking, are going to buy bicycles, are going to do whatever they can to try and get home, because they know that they've survived so far on their own wits, and they have to survive even now on their own wits. So whatever the government may say to them, this is no way to fight a pandemic. You can only fight a pandemic when you take people with you. From the very beginning, you have actually said that you will stay what you are, where you are. You have ordered them. You have had double standards with them. And here I'd like to say it's not just a question of the government. It is a question of our ruling classes.
Yeah.
All of us who actually have access to many things, we have also sat within our homes. We have watched within the safety of where we are also scared, but so are they scared about distance. This fear has been thrown into everyone, true or not true. And if it is true that you have to maintain physical distance, we have actually maintained social distance from them. We have cut themselves off. At most, we have watched on our television screens. And if we had solidarity, if we had the capacity to go out and say that these are our fellow country persons, then we would have done much more. We have to find a way to do much more. And actually, we are complicit in what is happening here. We are complicit in how the situation has developed of great inequality with these people. And today, we are complicit in their moment when we have collectively actually watched as they are being treated in this completely unequal and distressing fashion. We have watched and have been unable to put pressure to sort the situation out. So my last 2-3 minutes, I would like to say, what do we do from here? I know you want a set of action points later, but even now I want to point to some pointers. Immediately, we have to deal with the food crisis. We have enough. We may be a poor country in other ways, no matter what superpowers we say. We don't have 500 billion to put in each time of package that we put. But we have enough to put. We have food grain, 80 million tons of food grain. And the finance minister announces less than 1 million tons for the migrants without any idea of how you're even going to give that 1 million tons. We have no business to do that. All of us have a duty to keep at it till the government universalizes this PDS and gives at least 10 kilos of food grain every month till this crisis blows over. We have an employment guarantee program that must be rural and urban and must ensure that minimum wages come not just now, but for the next few months to people if they don't get work elsewhere. Otherwise, even this economy will not get going. We have a health system that is broken, that this is the moment to sort it out. We don't have hospitals that can function today. But tomorrow, the private sector has huge hospitals. Take them over, nationalize the health system, make the public health system available to everyone, use our public resources to make sure that in this health crisis, not just of COVID, but there are a million other illnesses that nobody is dealing with and treating these days, has to be dealt with so that there is equal access of health to all. These are 3 things we must do. And the 4th is that we must provide some basic income and livelihood security, for which an employment guarantee kind of thing. America did a New Deal program at the time when they had Great Depression. If a capitalist country could do that, India, with its great inequalities, must respond to a crisis by providing some sense of togetherness and hope and carrying people with us. There's a long road ahead, and we just have to stand by in solidarity and say that what works for us will work for others, and what works for others will work for us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nikhil. You have taken us to that road. It's so long, but you've asked a very pertinent question. The policy makers, this is a policy crisis. This is a policy crisis. It's a policy paralysis, I would call it. And they have not asked questions that they were supposed to ask before whatever they did. And whatever they have done now, even 5 kilos and whatever they have done, And they have asked them to register. Where are they going to give this money and the rates? But they are not there. They are on the streets. They are traveling. What are they going to do? So the pandemic you want to fight, you should have fought with the people. You cannot fight alone. And you also question not only the ruling party, you also question all of us. We are sitting in the protected walls. And what are we doing? Ruling class. You are not talking ruling party, ruling class. And we have given 4 important pointers, but I will take it later because you are talking about guarantee and the welfare. Not now, but some more months to happen until they become sufficiently they can take care of themselves. They're excellent points they have taken us further enhanced our thinking after Mr. Mander. Now we'll move to, because Dr. Pernari Sami has done a lot of research on this. He has followed this, monitored advocacy level he has worked as a researcher and a professor. What does he has to say about this from the point of view of international law? Because they are suspending this, they are amending this. What is going to happen to us? ILO, from the perspective of ILO. Over to Dr. Pernari Sami.
Thank you, Dr. Joaron. Thank you all, and I think we think these days that about the interstate migrants, there is very little known to the government, or the government is not aware of the interstate migrants. I don't buy this argument because this is the present government is the one which has made a lot of studies, and they have complete data on interstate migrants. 2011 census captured migration, and the data was not given. Best reasons known to the government. And the 2011 census, which captured the interstate migrants movement and interstate migration and their status and condition, it was released only last year in July. 10 months back only they released. And that too, this is one of the recommendations of the working committee, the working group on migration. And Harsh was there in Delhi in 2015. Myself was also there in that meeting. That was the meeting in which, the working group was formed and the chairperson was there. And then they went in for this. And the working group with 18 members, they worked with the Ministry of Urban and Urban Development. And they submitted a report in 2017, which has all the details about the interstate migrants. And the recommendations, that is what we wrote in the front line, the recommendations that they have made, in that. And the 2017 Economic Survey of India, for the first time, it had a chapter on interstate migrants. And Dr. Rajan and many others were consulted by the economic advisor to the government at that time, Arvind Subramaniam. And the Economic Survey of India said that, our estimates are 9 million. And when they were asked, how did you get this number 9 million? They said that, the tickets given by the railways for people to travel in the unreserved compartment, with that we have taken this data of 9 million. So, it is not that the government is not aware of, the government is fully aware of. And with the 2015 working group on migration and their report, and with the 2017 Economic Survey of India, and by the data given by last year, the interstate migrants data of census of 2011 been given, I think that this government has all the details with it. And I think what we are seeing now is a deliberate attempt to, thinking that, nobody has any idea or data on interstate migrants. Second, what we could see during this period of time is also a kind of, two categories of people I see, in the last 1 year. One is through the Citizenship Amendment Act and, NRC, the stateless creation of stateless people in India. And the second one is the second-class citizens in India. The migrants being treated as second-class citizens. They have been asked to register. Why they should register within the country when they move from one place to another? I don't understand. And a complete surveillance on the migrants. The employer and the police, they keep, surveillance, Raj, on the migrants. and they should be given ID cards. And everybody has an Aadhaar card. Everybody has some other ID in this country. But why they should be given a separate ID card? I think all this goes to prove that the migrant workers being treated as second-class citizens. And third, I think the migrant workers, when the crisis started by March 28, they had a premonition. The migrant workers had a premonition that the Janata curfew was on 22nd March, and they had actually started the journey in the trains. But the biggest mistake and the Himalayan blunder was committed by this government by stopping the trains. In Chennai, in Central Station, they stopped the Alapi-Bokaro Express, which was carrying all the migrant workers to Orissa and West Bengal and other places. They detrained them and they were taken to different places, to the marriage halls, to the schools. And the public protested that these were the people who would spread the COVID, so they protested and they were changed from one marriage hall to another marriage hall, one school to another school. And like that, I think this is the first time, if only the migrant workers had stayed in the source area, they would have been taken care well by the states which hosted them, at least to some extent. But for the first time, I think this time the crisis precipitated, the magnitude of the crisis enlarged because the migrants were not in transit, neither in transit nor in destination, but they were in the transit. They were in the states, absolutely of which they are not aware of. Language and many other things they are not aware of. Even now we have in all the states migrants, neither they belong to the destination nor to the states. I think this is another thing that is a blunder committed by this. And fourthly, how to take care of the migrants. Relief camps were, most of the states they had a relief camp, but absolutely there is no standard operating procedure SOP. All the time we think that the migrants, whenever the picture of the migrant comes, it is single male migrants. It is not only single male migrants, it is also single female migrants and families and children moving. The UNESCO data of 15 million children are migrants tells us that in the absence of SOP, how the relief camps were able to cater to the needs of the migrants. Whether they were able to take care of only the male migrants or separately the female migrants and families and how they housed, we don't know. I think one of the things that was missing during this period is the lack of the standard operating procedures in the relief camps, and at the same time, clear instruction of the states to the states by the union government how to deal with the migrants. And I also would like to tell you that some states, they manage this crisis very well. For example, my friend Dr. Rajan, who wrote this article, and also he is in the COVID committee of Kerala. Kerala had organized 15,541 relief camps. Can you imagine 15,541 relief camps in a small state like Kerala? And the community kitchen was open 24 hours in all the panchayat level. They were able to provide food to the migrants. They were able to take care of the migrants very well. Not only they were the first one to call the migrant workers as the nomenclature is very important. They were the first one to start calling them as guest workers and replacement workers, not migrant workers. And even today, the papers and the media is carrying and projecting them as migrant workers. But some of the states like Kerala, they did very well in looking after the migrants. But the only thing, they started from Kerala, but they were stranded in the middle as transit only. The problems multiplied for the guest workers and replacement workers. About the legal regime, the working group, one of the recommendations of the working group on migration, they very clearly said that we don't need a separate law to protect the migrant workers. They can be brought under every labor law because they are laborers and they are migrants, they are laborers, and that should be the attitude because in the states that are receiving the migrant workers, more is done in the name of charity and welfare rather than looking at the core labor standards. I don't think that any of the states which are hosting migrant workers have addressed the core labor standards in terms of working hours and minimum wages and the conditions in which they are working. That has been given a clear, clear go, and then it is more welfare and it is more charity oriented approach towards the migrants that is providing rather than addressing the core labor issues. And finally, what I would like to place before you is this. 2018, towards the end, the Supreme Court of India called the Labour Commissioner to appear in person in Supreme Court. Justice Lakur and Deepak Kumar, they summoned them, the bench summoned them. The reason is there is a Construction Other Building Workers Act 2006. And this act says that this act and then the CES Act says that 1% is collected from the contractors, building contractors. That money collected from 2006 to now is 30,000 crores. Day before yesterday, the finance minister announced 100 crores for the migrants, from the PM CARES fund. The migrants on their own, they have 28,000 crores. The Supreme Court summoned the Labour Commissioner and asked him, what are you thinking? They are suffering and what are you doing? And the Comptroller and Auditor General's report says that this money has been used for buying laptops and washing machines. And I think this is the worst way, to treat the migrants. And the Supreme Court told them that you have to enact rules and get back to us by September 2018. The government is yet to respond to that, summoning of the Labour Secretary. And with this 28,000 lying with the construction workers board in every state, it is only Kerala which has spent about 60-65% of the money, and Tamil Nadu about the 30% of money. All other states, Chhattisgarh to some extent took 45% or 50% of the money collected. All other states have spent less than 10% of the money. If only the states have decided to send the migrant workers, they could have hired a AC coach and then send them. Because the money is 28,000 crores and it is a money meant for the migrant workers. I think these are the areas in which we have to concentrate more in the days to come. Because this money, if it is spent on them, I think we could have looked after them well. Thank you.
Excellent, Dr. Pernari Sami. You have said 2017, the entire policy, interstate migrants policy, were there. You have not followed it. The economic survey separate chapter is there. And you have not followed it. Migrants, as if migrants are criminals, you are putting on surveillance everywhere. As if they are criminals. They are terrorists. And the magnitude of this suffering is seen not earlier, but now in the transit. They do not know where to go. They don't understand in the transit, different states, different problem, food. I don't know. No public, the state or any government authorities are looking at it at all. The suffering there are standard operating procedures, but still they have not followed it. Is there a standard operating procedure for the migrant workers? You don't have. And particularly, I've also talked about the legal frameworks. There must be separate law for them. There must be every labor law must also have a section on the migrant workers. And the resources meant for them, they are eating up, and somebody else is eating it up. So you have covered a wide variety of the large canvas you worked on. Thank you so much. Now we will take some questions because I see in my chat so many questions. I think next 5 days we will have to spend to answer all these questions. But I'll take first question, which is very interesting. They're asking the portability of schemes. You announce a scheme. Today also, Finance Minister announced the third set of things, the infrastructure in the coal and the Air Force, defense and all that. Will the portability of schemes be effective given to the fact that every state follows at different ways? Is it possible at portability? I would like to take from first Mr. harsh movement?
I think that at last we've come alive to the reality of migrant workers. I also wanted to say that migrant workers, we're talking about them as if they are one kind of worker. I think there's a whole range. Uh, there's the circular migrant, which is a particularly vulnerable category. Jon Bremen has described them as hunters and gatherers of work. They're people who are so desperate that they will accept any work on any terms in any corner of the country in order to survive. So one year they may be in Arunachal in the frontiers building a bridge or a dam. The next year they may be in Kerala. The third year they may be in a brick kiln near Hyderabad, and so on and so forth. They are the most vulnerable even among the migrants. There's also a category of people who, uh, we might forget about the urban poor who are left behind because they have nowhere to go. And I work a lot with urban homeless people, and in fact, just 2 days ago, I was sitting with them. They're people who actually are migrants, but who have lost contact. They are often single men who were unable to take care of their families and slowly broke their bonds with them. There are single women who have arrived here because of extreme domestic violence. There are all kinds of people. So that's one thing. But portability, since you asked the specific question about portability, I think is most imperative. But I would say the first portability that I would recommend is the portability of voting rights. Their reality would be different if economies like Kerala, we have a good response. Kerala and Kashmir are two states where people take care of the migrant workers. They have respect for them because they realize their economies. But in most other places, we treat them like a dispensable use and throw kind of commodity. I believe that the first portability in India, wherever you are on voting day, you should have the right to vote. And if that happens, both with the circular migrants who cannot go back just to vote, and the migrants, even of the kind that we see, that is really crucial. Once that happens, people will be, the elected representative will take care of the interests of the migrant if they become voters in the host community. Apart from that, of course, PDS and every other social security should be something that you should be entitled to: maternity benefits, pensions, PDS, wherever you are in the country at any point of time.
I think that you have taken this portability, not only the schemes, portability also the rights franchise. That's a fantastic point. I have plenty of questions, but I would like to ask both Dr. Pernari Sami and Nikhil on the whole question. There are plenty of questions on when they return to their native places. What do they think? Is there a job available? Are they going to get into the whole rut of this the caste discrimination, oppression? How do you see them go back to their place? Are they going to return to their work? And what is the plight? Because it's like, falling from the fire, from the oven to the fire, completely they are in a bad situation. So many, at least about 10 to 15 questions are there. Ask, what do you think that will happen to them? And how to, in a sense, activate the civil society to protect them, if not the government. How do we do this?
Nikhil.
First, Mr. Nikhil, and the next, Dr. Pernari Sami.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with Harsh that we're dealing with actually a very wide range of people. I agree also with Dr. Benedict Swami that there's a large amount of work that's been done to identify this group of people. But that work is unseen and unheard and untaken into account even in policy circles. It's one thing to do a study, it's another thing to take count of them, to make them, which is why while they were completely doing away with labor laws in one state after the other, the question quite legitimately arose that were these laws ever implemented? Now, it is true that these laws were rarely implemented, but nevertheless, the laws provided a kind of a shield. The laws provided a kind of an idea towards which a segment of people at least went. And we will see that if those laws, the state of lawlessness, which practically has been sought to be brought in, is like a state of removing the constitution as far as work is concerned. Every kind of constitutional protection being removed. So where do we fall? What is the mere scheme and portability? It's such a minor question. I mean, the framework within which people are operating is the framework that is drawn from the Constitution of equal rights, of fundamental rights, of a measure of being treated with equality. That gives you something to fight for. After that, if you throw small bits here and there, which have no real legal validity, which have no real practical validity, you are just dealing with jumlas. You are just dealing with promises that mean nothing. What will your rations? You're talking about one nation, one ration card and portability without having universal rights. So each state has its own rights. Pensions, the government of India talks about, the Prime Minister says that in this complete crisis, we must look after our elderly. Only 30% of the elderly are actually covered by the government of India's pension, and I think people should know what that pension is. The social security pension given by government of India is 200 rupees a month, 7 rupees a day, and it has been so since 2007. So when these same unorganized sector workers go home when they get old, what do they rely on? They have nothing to live on. They have no social security, none at all. The day they don't work, which is why the day they don't work, they head home. The day they don't work, they don't have anything to go back on. So portability is just something that this is being thrown and tossed about to keep people like us busy.
Okay.
But one last thing I'd like to say, I think out of this, these are not people who don't have the capacity to fight. They have used individual capacity to seek work because this capitalist structure throws you into that individual seeking and keep thinking of trying to make it in your life. Yeah. I think now they have collectively faced something terrible, and I think there's a potential of a collective response which we must all try and build so that they have a better and a more equal and a more just future.
I just want to thank you very much, Mr. Nikhil. I just want to ask Dr. Pernari Sami, because we need to go to their native places before they reach their native places, their home states. Some questions are on. Don't we think today we need to focus on rural development because their people are going to be in their own native places instead of catering to? So far, these migrant workers have been building the cities and an urban centers. Now they are going back to their own places where they don't have work. And what do they do? So what we exactly redefine, enhance this whole concept of rural development, and what is the role of civil societies to work together to make the governments accountable? I am just putting so many questions together. Accountability, making them accountable by civil society, and at the same time also looking at the rural development because they are returning to their native
places. Migration, is defined as a cycle. So migration is a cycle where people keep moving, from the destination to the source to the new destination. Like that, they keep moving, and construction worker, those who are in construction work, they keep moving. And you also mentioned in the last question about the caste, and the report on the working group mentions that in construction work and in bricklands, it is the SCs and STs who are predominantly working. And the bricklands are the ones, where you also have the bonded laborers. So I think this has to be taken into consideration. There's a reverse migration also will lead to remigration. I think that my migration is dynamic. this is the reason why, while talking about the data on migration, the working group also suggested to the NSSO that please take the data, collect data once in 3 months, because migration is dynamic and the corridors of migration are changing every now and then. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. Today the destination may be Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Tomorrow the destination may be very different. In Orissa, they have 11, 12 districts like Nuwapata, Bolangir, Ganjam. But in Orissa, they will tell you, Ganjam people will go to this state for this work. And Nuwapata, they go to this state for this work. That kind of a migration, that is what is taking place. And as Harsh rightly mentioned, they are not in the, they are not in the wood, they are not a vote bank. Their franchise is denied, their franchise is taken away. They have no voting right. Precisely because they are not, in the vote bank, their rights and their rights are denied and they continue to get denied by the government. And about the portability, as you rightly mentioned, the working group recommendation is also that because in 2007 we had this Arjun Sengupta's wonderful report on unorganized sector. So we have Unorganized Sector Social Security Act. And under that, all these can come under the Unorganized Sector Social Security Act, pension and many other things. I told you this 28,000 crores which are lying with the government. It is precisely for the construction workers, pension, children, their education, pregnancy, all that is taken care of. That money is meant only for their welfare. Construction workers, which also includes
excellent. Excellent. See, another question that comes, I'd like to ask Mr. Nikhil, how do we address this institutionalized apathy of the classes? Because I think Mander talked about this ruling class, not only ruling party. How do we address this whole apathy that is supposed to be empathy today? All of us must empathize with. But there is a steep apathy. How do we address this? What is your take on this?
Yeah, so I think the apathy of the ruling class is almost endemic. We would never have been in this situation if we had a ruling class that thought of other people in a better sense of solidarity. I think if hope is to come, it's to come from these sets of people who have now understood fully that nobody is going to stand for them, but they have to stand maybe for each other. Today, as they are going and scrambling in this distress and trying to get home, once they get home, maybe they can get together and we can build a kind of political, these are political questions. We have run a country for 70 years, it's not a technical question. Yeah. We can get into technicalities. All of us have dealt with laws, the making of laws, the running of laws, the implementing of laws. We can deal with that, but the question of the apathy will be dealt with when this class of people who are the backbone of the country, who are the backbone of the economy, assert themselves and make themselves heard. Assert themselves and say that there has to be a more just and equal framework. And where you said that there are certain things, so even in this period where there's been great inequality, there have been some extraordinary laws. The MGNREJ, for instance, did something that people would not have believed could have come. That can be built on. And if it were to be built on, you would have employment. You would have employment at least at minimum wages, and you need to build on that in an urban area as well, and much more number of days, so that people have the capacity to fight. So some of these things are possible. I think, though, more than the scheme is a question of us understanding that the politics in this country has to change.
Oh, very good, very good. Now, I think we are nearing the end of our presentation. So now I would like to ask all the panelists, can you give us, because there are so many activists, so many NGO workers are online attendees into this seminar, and they would like to have, I assume they would like to have, what do we do? What is the action points? At least give me the proverbial 3. I wouldn't want to say 3. Already Nikhil has said 4. I would like to take from all of you 3, because you have got just about 15 minutes or so. I'll take from each one 3 minutes to tell us What are the action points? As we said, civil societies, all of us, the ruling classes and middle class are sitting in the place. All of us join together, do something. Let's not work on only the ruling party, the state government. And how do we influence policies? How do we take care of the welfare of this, all this? Looking at that, keep these points and tell me, what are those action points? I will start from us, Mander. In the meantime, I'm telling all the attendees, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting the poll. We are starting the poll. 2 questions you have asked, and the 2 questions you can all. Now I am starting the poll. Now it's going to be asking the question: are we in the right perspective? Are we covering all the points? Are we something that we have left out, so that we will take it up further? I am starting the poll now. Over to Mander to tell us action points 3 or 4.
So I agree very much with Nikhil that in the end change will come with the organization and assertion in democratic, peaceful but very powerful protest of these informal workers and what they have undergone. But I also believe very strongly in the importance of solidarity of people from the middle class. And I think that we have demonstrated ourselves over and over again to be a middle class which is so uncaring and so comfortable with injustice. Our capacity to see and look away. The exile. I've often talked about this as the exile of the poor from our conscience and our consciousness. I think that has to be reversed. Half of India is below the age of 25. I think they need to, those among them who are people of privilege need to take sides in this battle for a much more just and humane country. Very specifically, what needs to be done now, there's the immediate and the medium run that I'd like to talk about in my very briefly. My second point is really about what needs to be done in the immediate. I think there is no taking away from cash transfers which are substantial and which carry us through the period of the crisis, equivalent to minimum wage, and we've said 7,000 rupees per family. We've talked about the importance of universal public distribution system to all persons. We've talked about we talked about the nationalization of private health services. This is in the immediate run. These are some of the things that we need to do. But in the medium run, I think that there is this is really the time where we need to recognize. When Prabhat Patnaik, Jyoti and I were writing a couple of papers about what needed to be done. We realized that for the rural poor, at least because of NREGA, if we decided to give 7,000 rupees, we have a list of workers registered with bank accounts. In the urban area, we just don't have any idea. There's no record because the state has extended no protection whatsoever. And we felt that the only way actually cash can be distributed is almost using indelible ink like we do in an election. Anyone who comes takes cash and puts an indelible ink, and we let the person go, so that has to be changed. And so a regime of self-registration of workers, a regime of public funded social protection, not employer or employee, because as I said, only 17% of people have any kind of employer who is identifiable. It has to be public funded. Substantial social security and social protection is the second in the medium run. And the third is the strengthening of our public health systems. At last, let us have a primary health care system which works for the poor.
Thank you very much. Nikhil.
Yeah, so I completely...
I may request to all others who are not speaking to put off your audio when you want to speak, because there is a delay in answering. Nikhil.
So I completely underscore what Harsh has to say, and I think the immediate run things in any case, absolutely we have to do. We have to all your viewers can actually make a big difference. I think the middle class as a whole, I have very little hope for the ruling classes, but I do think committed individuals can do a lot, and we need to understand the power that the middle class holds in this country. So that is a responsibility on all those who feel rightly. And one of the things that we all must push for today is to use the food grain that exists, the stocks that exist, and universalize PDS immediately and give a commitment that nobody will go hungry. And there are ways and means today in which we can make sure that that ration reaches. I think immediately today we must make sure that everyone on the roads and everyone en route is reached home safe, with enough food, and with a kind of transportation system that can be put into place tomorrow. So every day that we can spend in making sure, because this is a project that's not going to take a few days, it's going to take a few weeks or even months at the rate at which things are. So we have to make sure that this changes, and this can be done in an immediate sense. The third thing that I would say in an immediate sense that we have to make sure about is that the access to health, no matter where you are, must, with whatever resources we have, be given immediately. But the larger things that I'd like to state, and very quickly, number one, democracy has to be protected, because if we don't have the space to speak, this is what this regime is trying to do. It's trying to lock us into our homes and lock us out. Section 144 is being used not just to protect against COVID, but actually protect against any kind of protest. So we have to protect democracy. Number two, we have to make sure that we have a legal framework that from now itself talks about not just repairing and protecting what we have, but actually talks about a far more equal working structure that does not lead to the inequalities that we've been seeing. The greatest inequalities in the world are coming out of India, despite our growth rate, but that there is a share in those resources so that people can start saying that we want our share of our resources. And number three, that we have to talk about education and health. We are forgetting about education. Education is what is leading to a lot of inequalities, and in our state, it is our responsibility to make sure that now we have an equal health system and an equal education system. And those big ticket things are what we need to spend time on, because as soon as people can get enough food and can get enough immediate health, they need to be able to have the democratic space. And if, no matter what it takes and how long it takes, it's to use methods of democracy to form, to work towards a better India, and understand through this crisis that we have failed in that exercise.
Okay, good. I think, Nikhil, webcam is, you're not being seen. It's okay. We heard you very, very well. Let's listen to Dr. Pernari Sami. 3 pointers.
Yeah, Jaron, I thought that number one, I would give my first priority for the implementation of the recommendations made by the working group on migration. The recommendations made, portability of rights and self-registration, Harsh mentioned, they're all there. Why should a person goes and then forcibly make a migrant worker to register? Even in the 1979 Interstate Workers Act, the Act says that non-registration is not an offense. So in that way, I think self-registration and apps for the self-registration is very much needed. And that is what the working committee has recommended. I think having constituted a committee and sitting on the recommendations is not doing justice, and it must be done. Second, the government has reduced all the 44 labor laws at the national level and 100 laws at the state level into 4 courts. And the parliamentary committee recently, when they met and when many of those who are working with the migrant workers, when they presented the case, the parliamentary committee agreed that they will have a 5th court for the migrant workers. That is something that is positive. I think the civil society should work on that, and then whatever input we can give in terms of migrant workers, and particularly, as I said, the issues that we have not addressed are the labor issues. That has to be addressed in terms of minimum wages, protection, and safe migration. And those are the things that has to be addressed. Third, immediately the government should restore public transport system. I think one Himalayan blender from day one they have done is to stop the trains and buses. If only the buses and trains ply, migrant workers will safely, they will reach their home. Then only we can think of a remigration. If this experience is going to be a very bad, and it is a bad experience, the remigration will not take. So immediately to restore the public transport system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me recount all these together because this replay of this video, entire thing will be available in the same link for all the attendees if they have questions, and many people have asked this. But I just put together all this together. First, we must take sides. Now you have come to time, you must take a side. What is your side? Are you with the migrants? Are you with the ruling class? Second, the cash transferred to the migrant workers must be substantial and sound. Third, strengthen the public health sector. Public health sector, not private health sector. And food grain is available. The committee, we must make a commitment to make the food grain, the ration, sufficiently given to these people, not only next 2 months, next 4 or 5 months. Reach the poor. And particularly, we need to protect the migrant workers who are en route to their places. And they must be given proper transport. They must be given proper protection. There are women who are pregnant, who are delivering babies on the road. This is the country we live in. So access to health to these people. And the next one is about implementing the working group on migration. That's efficient and excellent report is available. What are the things to be done? They must implement. The labor laws are there, must reactivate and made public, and also make people, or particularly the state governments, to accountable. And particularly make this public transport is available. It's a very, very, very sad that trains and the buses are stopped. Who will travel to return their homes? But to conclude, because I have 2 minutes, I want to thank you. But I see that democracy, we are all not, the coronavirus patients are not quarantined. Democracy is quarantined. It is tested positive. We need to heal that democracy becomes negative, means it is healed so that the voices are heard. The welfare, legal framework, advocacy are all activated, that the voice of the voiceless is heard. I want to thank all of you. It's time to close. And I'm extremely happy and grateful to all of you, all the panelists, all the attendees from all over the world. We have talked now. Now we have to walk the talk. Thank you so much. Bye. Take care of your health and be safe. Stay healthy. Thank you so much.